Hello, my dear students. Today, I want to share a personal story with you. It is a story about failure, but also about learning, growth, and never giving up. I call it When Failure Became My Teacher. Maybe you are also facing some difficult moments in your life. Maybe you have failed before, just like I did. If so, I hope this story will help you believe in yourself again. A few years ago, I was a young student full of hope and big dreams. I had one goal: to learn English and build a better life. I wanted to speak English fluently. I wanted to travel to other countries, find a good job, and make my family proud. I believed that if I worked hard, success would come quickly. I was excited and confident. I thought I was ready to face anything. Every morning, I would wake up early and follow a strict routine. I would make a plan for the day, watch English videos on YouTube, read English books, and speak to myself in the mirror. I practiced every day, believing that one day I would become fluent. I thought I was doing everything right. I had so much energy and motivation inside me. I truly believed nothing could stop me. Then one day, I registered for an important English exam. It was the first big test of my journey. I felt ready. I had studied hard, practiced a lot, and believed that I would pass easily. On the day of the exam, I felt nervous, but I also believed in myself. I told my family, "Don't worry, I will pass." They smiled and believed in me too. But life had a different plan. A week later, the exam results came. I opened the email with a big smile on my face. But when I saw the result, my heart dropped. I had failed. Not just by a little. I had failed badly. I could not believe it. I checked the score again and again, hoping there was a mistake. But it was real. I had failed. At that moment, I felt completely broken. I felt embarrassed, sad, and angry at myself. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I stayed in my room and cried quietly. All my dreams felt far away now. I thought, maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I'm not good enough to learn English. I wanted to give up. But that was not the end of my story. It was just the beginning. After I failed the exam, everything felt dark and heavy. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I stopped studying. I stopped watching English videos. I even stopped practicing my speaking. Every time I saw my books or heard someone speak English, I felt pain in my heart. I remembered how excited I was before the exam, and now I felt ashamed. My confidence was gone. I felt like a loser. Some of my friends passed the same exam, and I saw their happy faces. I smiled in front of them, but deep inside, I felt broken. I started asking myself many hard questions. Why did I fail? I studied so hard. I gave everything I had. Was it all for nothing? For a few days, I did nothing. I just sat alone, thinking about giving up. I thought about quitting English completely. I even told myself, maybe English is not for me. Maybe I'm just not smart enough. These thoughts stayed in my mind, day and night. I felt like I was stuck in a hole, and I didn't know how to climb out. But something inside me didn't die. After a few days of silence and sadness, I had a quiet moment. I looked at myself in the mirror and asked a new question. What if failure is not the end? What if failure is trying to teach me something? That question stayed with me. I remembered a quote I once read. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of success. Slowly, I started to see my failure in a different way. Maybe this failure had something to teach me. Maybe this pain had a purpose. I didn't know the answer yet, but I knew one thing. I didn't want to give up forever. I wanted to try again, but this time, I would do it differently. After many days of sadness and quiet thinking, I made a small decision. I decided to look back and ask myself, why did I really fail? I took out my exam papers and went through them slowly. I looked at my mistakes. I noticed that I had made some silly grammar errors. In the listening section, I missed many answers because I didn't focus properly. And in the speaking part, I got nervous and forgot many simple words. At first, it was painful to look at these mistakes. But then, something changed. I realized that failure was not the end. It was information. It was a message telling me where I needed to improve. I began to understand that failure is not something to be afraid of. It is something to learn from. So I took out a notebook and wrote down every mistake I made in the test. I wrote what I did wrong, and I wrote what I needed to do to improve. I wrote, I need to work more on listening. I need to practice speaking with confidence. I need to review grammar rules again. Writing these things gave me clarity. It helped me see that the problem was not me. The problem was my method. I didn't prepare in the best way. I worked hard, yes, but I didn't work smart. That was a big lesson. For the first time, I started to feel a little stronger. I was no longer afraid of my failure. I was starting to understand it. And slowly, I was ready to move forward. That's when I made a new promise to myself. I said, I will not give up. I will learn from this. I will come back stronger. My dream was still alive. But now, I had a better plan. And most importantly, I had a new teacher. Failure itself. After learning from my failure, I knew I couldn't go back to the same old routine. I had to change the way I was learning. This time, I wanted to be smarter. I wanted to learn in a way that really worked for me. So, I started by making a new plan. Not just a schedule, but a full learning strategy. I divided my time into 4 parts: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Every day, I gave time to each skill. In the past, I only focused on watching videos and repeating words. But now, I knew that wasn't enough. I had to understand the language, not just memorize it. I began with listening practice. I chose slow English podcasts, beginner stories, and simple conversations. At first, I still didn't understand everything. But instead of getting upset, I told myself, it's okay, listen again. And I did. I listened to the same story 5 times, sometimes even 10 times. Slowly, I started hearing the words more clearly. I paused and repeated the sentences. I spoke with the voice on the recording. I even closed my eyes and tried to understand the meaning just by the sound. That small habit made a big difference. Every week, my ears became sharper. My understanding grew, and I started to enjoy the process. Then, I focused on speaking. This was the hardest part for me because I had no one to talk to in English. But I didn't let that stop me. I spoke to myself in the mirror every day. I talked about my daily routine, my feelings, my goals, all in English. Sometimes I recorded my voice and listened back to it. I sounded strange at first. I made many grammar mistakes, but I kept going. Slowly, my confidence returned. I didn't care if I was perfect. I only cared that I was improving. I even started using English words in my thoughts. When I walked outside or washed the dishes, I spoke to myself in English. English started to become a part of my life. Reading also became an important part of my journey. I chose short stories for beginners. I read them again and again until I understood every word. I underlined new vocabulary and wrote the meaning in a notebook. I didn't rush. I took my time. I read out loud to practice pronunciation. Reading helped me see how sentences are built. It showed me the rhythm and structure of the language. And slowly, I began to enjoy English not just as a subject, but as a beautiful language. I even started to dream in English sometimes. That surprised me. Writing was the last part of my plan. I started with a journal. Every night, I wrote about my day in English. Just a few lines at first, then longer entries. I didn't worry about grammar too much. I just wanted to express my thoughts. Over time, writing became a way to see my own progress. I looked back at old entries and noticed the mistakes I used to make. Mistakes I no longer made. That feeling made me proud. I wasn't perfect, but I was growing. I also made another big change. I stopped comparing myself to others. Before, I used to look at other students who spoke better than me and feel jealous. But now, I only looked at myself. I asked, am I better than I was yesterday? If the answer was yes, then I smiled and kept going. I understood that English was a journey, not a race. And every small step mattered. Failure had opened my eyes. It had pushed me to think deeper and work smarter. It had made me stronger, more patient, and more focused. I didn't fear mistakes anymore. In fact, I welcomed them. Because each mistake was a new chance to learn something. That change in mindset was the biggest lesson of all. I had become a student not just of English, but of life. My new way of learning wasn't fast or easy. It was slow, quiet, and steady. But it was real. I could feel the progress every day. And I knew that this time, I was not only preparing for another exam, I was preparing for my future. With courage, with care, and with the lessons that failure had taught me. Weeks passed, then months. Every single day, I followed my new plan. Some days were good. I felt strong, focused, and excited to learn. Other days were hard. I felt tired, lost, or even bored. But this time, I didn't give up. I reminded myself of my failure, not to feel sad, but to stay honest. That moment of failure had become my reason to grow. It had become my teacher. So, even when I didn't feel like studying, I told myself, just do a little. Even 10 minutes. And I did. That habit of small effort every day became my secret weapon. Then something beautiful started to happen. I began to notice small wins. At first, they were tiny. I could understand full sentences in English movies without subtitles. I was able to respond quickly when someone asked me a question in English. One day, I was walking in the market, and a tourist asked for directions. Without thinking, I replied in English, clearly and confidently. The tourist smiled and said, "Your English is really good." That one sentence stayed in my heart for days. It gave me hope. It showed me that I was moving in the right direction. Later, I started speaking in online language groups. I found people from all over the world, Brazil, Japan, Egypt, Turkey, all learning English just like me. We talked about simple topics, daily routines, favorite foods, our cultures. At first, I was nervous. I made mistakes. But no one laughed. They supported me, and I supported them. That experience made me realize something powerful. I was not alone. There are millions of learners around the world. We all have different stories, but we share the same dream: to speak English, to grow, to connect. Every week I wrote down my progress. I didn't only write what I learned, I also wrote how I felt. I wrote, "This week I understood 80% of a podcast episode." Today I finished my first book in English. I had a 5-minute conversation without fear. These were small wins, but to me, they were like gold. I didn't need big success right away. These small steps were changing my life. They were helping me build confidence, courage, and clarity. Slowly, my English level improved, not only in words and grammar, but in mindset. I was no longer afraid of mistakes. I began to see them as friends. Every time I made a mistake, I said, "Thank you. You just showed me what to fix." I didn't hide from my weaknesses anymore. I faced them with a smile. I became my own coach, and that made me stronger every day. Even my family and friends noticed the change. "You sound different," they said. "More confident, more positive." I smiled and said, "It's because I failed once, and that failure became my teacher." They didn't understand at first, but then I told them everything. I shared how that painful moment of failure opened the door to a new life, a better life, a stronger version of me. One day, I decided to try the exam again, the same one I had failed before. This time, I didn't study with fear. I studied with peace and understanding. I didn't try to be perfect. I only wanted to do my best. And deep inside, I already knew something. Whether I passed or not didn't matter as much as before. Why? Because I had already won. I had already grown. I had already changed. The person I had become, someone who learns from failure, keeps going, and never quits. That was more important than any exam. But still, I took the exam. And this time, something magical happened. The day of the second exam arrived. I woke up early. My hands were shaking a little and my heart was beating fast. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I was excited. I was ready. I looked at myself in the mirror and said, "You have worked hard. You have learned so much. Just give your best." I took a deep breath, smiled at my reflection, and left the house. On the way to the test center, I thought about the last time I was there. The fear, the sadness, the tears. But this time was different. I wasn't the same person anymore. That failure had made me stronger, and I was proud of the journey I had taken. When I sat down in the exam room, I closed my eyes for a moment. I reminded myself that the score didn't define me. What defined me was the effort I had given every single day. The test began. I started with the listening part. I focused deeply, just like I had practiced for months. I understood most of it, and I didn't panic when I missed a word. I kept going. Then came reading. I stayed calm, took my time, and used all the strategies I had learned. After that was writing. I planned my paragraphs before writing. I made sure my ideas were clear. I remembered to keep my grammar simple but correct. Finally, it was time for the speaking test. This had been the scariest part for me before. But now, I was ready. When the examiner asked me questions, I didn't freeze. I smiled, answered naturally, and spoke with confidence. Yes, I made a few small mistakes, but I didn't let them stop me. I just kept going. I was not trying to sound perfect. I was trying to be real. The examiner nodded and smiled. That small smile gave me peace. After the speaking test, I walked out of the room and looked up at the sky. I didn't know what my final result would be, but I felt proud, truly proud, because I knew I had done my best. I had faced my fear. I had returned to the same place where I had once failed. And this time, I stood tall. The waiting days after the exam felt long. Every day, I checked my email and refreshed the results page. But instead of feeling nervous, I felt hopeful. I told myself, even if I don't pass, I have still grown. And if I fail again, I will learn again. That kind of thinking made me feel calm. I had changed my relationship with failure. It no longer controlled me. It no longer scared me. In fact, it had become my greatest teacher. Then, one morning, I opened my inbox and saw a message. Your exam results are now available. My heart skipped a beat. My hands were cold. I clicked the link, entered my details, and waited for the page to load. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them slowly. And there it was, my result. I had passed. Not just passed. I had done better than I expected. I read the scores again and again just to be sure. I couldn't believe it. The same exam that had once broken my heart had now become a symbol of my victory. I jumped out of my chair, laughed out loud, and even cried a little. But these were not tears of sadness. These were tears of strength, growth, and deep joy. I called my family and shared the news. They were so happy for me, but they also said something important. We are not proud of your score. We are proud of your journey. That touched my heart, because they had seen me struggle, fail, fall, and then rise again. They had watched me grow from someone who felt hopeless into someone who believed in themselves. But more than anyone, I was proud of myself. Not just for passing the test, but for not giving up, for learning from my pain, for standing back up after falling. That was the real success. I realized something that day. Success is not about always winning. Success is about continuing, even after losing. It's about finding the lesson inside the failure. And that lesson changes everything. From that moment on, I didn't fear challenges anymore. I didn't avoid difficult things, because I had learned that every failure is a doorway to growth. If we have the courage to walk through it, we become stronger. We become wiser. We become who we are meant to be. That one failure, the one that once made me cry, had become the turning point of my life. After that day, my life slowly began to change. I had more confidence in myself, not only in English, but in every part of my life. That one moment of failure had taught me how to be brave. It had taught me how to be patient. It had shown me that the road to success is not a straight line. It is full of turns, falls, stops, and starts again. I learned that failure is not the end of the story. It is just the beginning of a better one. When I look back now, I feel thankful for that painful experience. Yes, it hurt me. Yes, it broke me for a while. But in the end, it built me into someone stronger. Today, I help others who are learning English. I tell them my story. I remind them that it's okay to fail. I say, don't be afraid. Failure is your teacher. Let it guide you. Let it shape you. Because I know, if I had never failed, I would never have become the person I am today. That failure was not my enemy. It was my greatest lesson. And now, wherever I go, I carry this message in my heart. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of success. It teaches us. It humbles us. And if we listen carefully, it shows us the way forward. So if you are listening to this and you have failed before, in English, in school, in life, I want you to remember this. Failure is not the end. It is your beginning. Get up. Try again. Learn. Grow. Your best days are still ahead. And like me, one day, you will also say with a smile, failure became my teacher, and I'm thankful it did.